When my husband Arthur passed, I never imagined the real nightmare was just beginning. Looking at my daughter-in-law Jessica's face, I understood the meaning of hate. "This house is mine now," she said with an icy smile, throwing my suitcases onto the curb. "Can you go to a nursing home?" I said nothing. I just smiled. She didn't know I had a secret that would change everything. The $2 million Arthur had left exclusively for me, along with our beach house in Naples, Florida, that she never even dreamed existed. But before we continue, check if you're subscribed to Elderly Stories and write in the comments where you're watching from. We love knowing how far our stories are reaching. Arthur's casket lowered slowly into the cold earth that rainy September morning. After 38 years of marriage, he left with the same serenity he lived with, leaving only silence and a void that seemed to fill every atom of my being. We had faced so many storms together, but this one I would have to cross alone. As the last people scattered from the cemetery, I felt a hand touch my shoulder. It was Michael, our only son. "Mom, let's go home. You need to rest." I nodded silently, unable to turn the whirlwind of emotions consuming me into words. Beside me, Jessica, my daughter-in-law, remained unmoved. There wasn't a single tear in her eyes, no sign of mourning on her face, just a calculating gaze that scanned every person present as if she were tallying who might be useful in the future. During the drive back, the silence in the car was only broken by the sound of the rain hitting the windshield. Michael drove, while Jessica constantly checked her phone. Not a single word was spoken. The house that Arthur and I built together in Chicago, the one where we raised our son and planted dreams, now seemed like a strange place. It was as if all the memories had been swept away, along with my husband's soul. When we arrived, I noticed something strange at the garage entrance. My 3 suitcases, the ones I had packed to stay a few days at Michael's house after the burial, were piled up at the entrance, exposed to the drizzle that continued to fall. "What does this mean?" I asked, my voice thick with exhaustion. Jessica shrugged and gave a cold smile. "I thought you understood. Now that Arthur is gone, things are going to change." Michael looked at the floor, avoiding my gaze. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Son, what does your wife mean by this?" My voice came out almost as a whisper. It's temporary, Mom," he stammered. "Jessica thinks it would be better if you stayed somewhere else." Before I could process what was happening, Jessica stepped forward. Her expensive perfume invaded my nostrils as she got close. "From now on, this house is mine," she declared with a firmness that left me stunned. "You can go to a nursing home. It would be more convenient for all of us." The cruelty of those words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I looked at Michael, waiting for him to defend me, to say something, anything, but he remained silent, like a shadow of himself dominated by this woman I never really knew. I took a deep breath. There were no tears to cry. The shock gave way to a strange calm, as if a part of me had disconnected from reality. "I understand," I replied simply. I took my suitcases and carried them to the small utility room at the back of the property, a place Arthur used as a tool shed. The smell of dampness and mold filled my nostrils. A small makeshift bed had been placed in a corner next to an old table where a dog bowl rested. The message was clear. I was worth less than a pet to them. I sat on the edge of that hard bed and looked around. The walls stained with dampness, and the small window that barely let in daylight would be my new home. I didn't let the tears fall, although they threatened to overflow at any moment. Arthur always said that in moments of greatest pain, silence was our best defense. "When they think you're defeated, Helen, that's when you must save your strength," he used to tell me. "The right silence is your most powerful weapon." As the night wore on, I sat in that damp room, remembering every detail of my life with Arthur. The generous, prudent man who always planned everything, who took care of every detail, even for when he was no longer here. What Jessica and Michael didn't know is that Arthur, in his quiet wisdom, had protected me. Before his illness worsened, he transferred all our most valuable assets to my name. A beach house in Naples, Florida that few knew existed, shares in profitable companies, and account overseas. In total, about $2 million. I looked at the locket I wore around my neck, a gift from Arthur on our last wedding anniversary. Inside it, a small compartment held the key to the safe where all the documents were secure. A faint smile formed on my lips as the rain continued to fall outside. Jessica thought I was just a helpless, disposable widow. She had no idea who I really was or what was coming. That night, I couldn't sleep. The sound of the rain on the tin roof marked the hours like a relentless metronome. I spent the early morning planning every step I would take from now on. Not for revenge, but for justice, for respect for Arthur's memory, and mainly for myself. When dawn broke, I heard Jessica's footsteps upstairs. The clinking of cups and the aroma of fresh coffee wafted down to my small room, reminding me that I would soon be summoned for my new duties in the house that was once mine. I got ready as best I could with the few clothes I had in my suitcases. I combed my gray hair and looked at the broken mirror hanging on the wall. At 63, my face bore the marks of a lifetime, but my eyes still shone with a quiet determination. "The game starts today, Arthur," I whispered into the void, "and you taught me how to play." When I went upstairs and entered the kitchen, Jessica was already sitting at the table tapping on her tablet. She barely looked up when I entered. "Ah, you're here. Breakfast must be served at 7 o'clock sharp. Michael wants scrambled eggs with bacon, and the kids prefer pancakes. I just want a fruit salad and a green juice." I didn't answer. I simply put on the apron that was hanging near the stove and began to prepare what she had requested. While I cut the fruit, I watched Jessica out of the corner of my eye. She seemed all too comfortable in the role of lady of the house, as if she had rehearsed this moment for years. The children Dylan and Jenna came down for breakfast, still sleepy. Jenna, at 10 years old, hugged me shyly. "Grandma, why are you in the kitchen making food?" Before I could answer, Jessica intervened. "Grandma is going to help us more around the house now. Isn't that great? That way you can see her every day." The girl looked confused, while Dylan just shrugged and focused on his phone. Michael appeared right after dressed for work, avoiding eye contact with me. "Good morning," he said, kissing the children's foreheads and Jessica's lips. I served breakfast in silence, observing every movement, every interaction. No one invited me to sit at the table. I stood near the counter like an employee waiting for new orders. "The children need to be ready for school in 20 minutes, Jessica announced, getting up. "And you can start cleaning the house after they leave. Oh, and don't forget to feed the dogs." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. Jessica came closer, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "You should be grateful I'm letting you stay here. Many mothers-in-law don't have that luck." When everyone left, I remained alone in that kitchen, which until a few days ago was the heart of my home. I cleared the table, washed the dishes, and organized everything meticulously. Every movement was executed with a calculated calm, as if I were just watching myself from the outside. While sweeping the living room floor, my eyes landed on the photograph that still held a prominent place on the shelf. Arthur and I hugging in front of the sea the day we bought our beach house in Naples, a property Jessica knew nothing about. In that moment, I decided I needed to act intelligently. Wait for the right moment, observe every move, every habit, every weakness. And above all, understand what was really happening in that house. Over the next week, I adapted to the new routine. I got up before everyone prepared breakfast, cleaned the house, washed, and ironed the clothes. Jessica never missed an opportunity to humiliate me with little comments or unnecessary orders. "Helen, you forgot to clean under the sofa. How careless. This plate still has a stain. Are you losing your sight?" Michael, for his part, seemed more and more distant. He came home late from work, always with a worried look. I tried to talk to him several times, but he always changed the subject or claimed to be busy. It was on one of those nights when everyone had already gone to bed that I decided to investigate Arthur's office. The place was exactly as he had left it. The books lined up on the shelf, the old leather armchair where he spent hours reading the solid oak desk we bought together on our 10th wedding anniversary. Carefully, I opened the desk drawer where Arthur kept important documents. It was empty. All the folders, contracts, and papers had disappeared. I felt a chill down my back. Someone had gone through everything. I continued my silent search. At the back of the bookshelf behind a row of books, I found what I was looking for, the small safe that Arthur installed years ago, known only to the two of us. Using the key I kept in my locket, I opened it with trembling hands. Inside, I found the original documents for all our properties, including the beach house, in addition to the will Arthur had made leaving me as the sole beneficiary. There was also an envelope addressed to me in my husband's unmistakable handwriting. My dearest Helen, if you are reading this letter, it means I am no longer by your side. Forgive me for that. I promised we would be together until the end, but life has its own plans. For all these years, I have watched with concern the changes in our son. The kind man we raised seems to have gotten lost under Jessica's influence. I fear that when I am gone, they will try to take advantage of you, of your goodness, your gentleness. That is why I took measures. I transferred everything we built together into your name. Our lawyer, Mr. George Stevens, has all the instructions. Look for him when you think it's necessary. Do not let them take your dignity, my love. You have always been stronger than you think. With all my love forever, Arthur. Silent tears streamed down my face as I held the letter to my chest. Arthur always knew. He always protected me, even knowing he wouldn't be here. I carefully placed everything back in the safe, except for a copy of the most important documents which I kept in my purse. I returned to my little room in the shed with a new feeling growing inside me. Determination. The next morning, when Jessica handed me an even longer list of household chores than usual, I just smiled and nodded. "Is there a problem, Helen?" she asked, suspicious of my sudden docility. "None," I replied calmly. "I'm just adapting to my new reality." She smiled, satisfied with what she interpreted as submission. Little did she know that while I cleaned the house and tended to the chores, I was observing every move, every whispered conversation on the phone, every document that passed through her hands. I began to notice a pattern. Every Tuesday afternoon, Jessica would leave saying she was going to the salon, but she would return with no apparent change. On Thursdays, Michael stayed late in the office claiming extra work, and both seemed worried about money despite the luxurious lifestyle they maintained. One night, while serving dinner, I heard Jessica comment to Michael, "We need to resolve that matter of the land in Miami. The buyer is getting impatient." Michael looked tense. "We can't sell something that isn't legally ours." Jessica lowered her voice, but I could still hear her. "Your father is dead. Who is going to challenge it?" I pretended not to have heard, but my heart sped up. They were planning to sell properties that now belonged to me without my knowledge or consent. That night, after everyone went to sleep, I made a call from my old cell phone, one Jessica considered too useless to bother checking. "Mr. George Stevens, this is Helen, Arthur's wife. We need to talk urgently." Mr. George Stevens' office was exactly as I remembered it. Shelves full of law books, the smell of fresh coffee, and that aura of discretion that always made me feel safe. At 72, the lawyer still maintained the same elegant posture and sharp gaze that inspired confidence. "Mrs. Helen, my deepest condolences for Arthur," he said, squeezing my hands between his. "A loyal friend, a man of integrity, an irreparable loss." I sat in the leather armchair in front of his desk, my hands trembling slightly as I opened my purse to take out the documents I had found. "George, I need to understand exactly what my current situation is," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And I need your complete discretion." The lawyer adjusted his glasses and examined each paper I placed in front of him. His face remained impassive, but I noticed the slight furrow in his brow as he read. "Arthur was extremely meticulous as always," he commented after a few minutes. "He transferred all the main assets to your name before his condition worsened. The house where you live, the property in Naples, the financial investments, everything is legally in your name." "And what about the rest?" I asked, remembering Jessica's mentions of land. "There are some properties that remained in Arthur's name, but his will is clear. You are the universal beneficiary." He took a folder from his drawer. "Here is a copy of the will already registered with the notary. No one can contest it." A momentary relief washed over me, but it was soon replaced by a new worry. And what if they try to sell something without my consent? George took off his glasses and looked me directly in the eyes. "Helen, If they try to carry out any transaction with properties that are legally in your name, they will be committing a crime. Forgery. Fraud. He paused. Is there any evidence that they are planning something like that? I told him about the conversation I had overheard and about my current situation in the house. The lawyer's eyes hardened. What they are doing to you is unacceptable. We could take legal action immediately to... I raised my hand, interrupting him gently. Not yet, George. I want to fully understand what is happening before taking any action. What do you plan to do then? He asked, intrigued. Observe, document, and when the time is right, act. I took a deep breath. But I need your help with a few things. I left the office 2 hours later with a well-defined plan and a sense of empowerment I hadn't felt in weeks. George had helped me understand exactly my rights and the measures we could take when necessary. Before returning home, I made a stop at a small electronics store where I bought 2 discrete recording devices and a minuscule camera that could be easily hidden. I wasn't proud of having to resort to such methods, but I needed concrete proof to protect myself. When I returned, I found the house empty except for Jenna, who was sitting on the porch reading a book. Her face lit up when she saw me. Grandma, where were you? Mom got mad when she couldn't find you to make lunch. I sat down next to her, touching her dark hair, so similar to Arthur's when he was young. I had to take care of some things, dear. Grown-up stuff. Jenna lowered her voice, looking around as if afraid of being heard. Mom said you're going to a special place for old people soon. Is that true, Grandma? I felt my heart shrink. And what do you think about that, Jenna? Her eyes filled with tears. I don't want you to go. I already lost Grandpa. I hugged her tightly, feeling her small head rest on my shoulder. Don't worry, dear. I'm not going anywhere. Later, when Jessica returned with Dylan, she barely contained her irritation at seeing me. Where were you? I had to order food because you weren't here to make lunch. I went to the doctor, I lied naturally. I have that routine checkup every month, remember? Jessica frowned but didn't question further. She probably didn't even bother to remember my medical appointments. Well, now that you're here, you can serve dinner at 7 tonight. Michael is bringing an important guest. That evening, I prepared an elaborate dinner, like in the old days when Arthur and I hosted Friends. Michael's guest was a middle-aged man named Richard Miller, who introduced himself as a real estate agent. Throughout the meal, I noticed significant glances exchanged between him, Michael, and Jessica. So Michael, Richard commented as he savored the dessert I had prepared. Is that land in Miami still available? Michael shot a nervous glance in my direction before answering. We're finalizing some details. Everything will be resolved soon. After the guest left, I waited for everyone to fall asleep to put my plan into action. Carefully, I placed one of the recording devices in the living room and another in the office where Jessica and Michael used to have their most private conversations. The next morning, while preparing coffee, I noticed Jessica on the phone speaking in a low voice on the porch. Yes, the land in Miami. No, she doesn't know anything. It's just a matter of time until we resolve the paperwork. My heart sped up. The land in Miami was an investment Arthur had made years ago. According to the documents I found, it had been transferred to my name shortly before his illness worsened. In the following days, I continued my apparently submissive routine while gathering information through the recordings and accidentally overheard conversations. The picture that was forming was alarming. Jessica and Michael were planning to sell several properties that now belonged to me, forging documents with the help of Richard, who was clearly not just an agent, but an accomplice in this scheme. One afternoon, while cleaning the couple's room, a task Jessica insisted on assigning me, probably to remind me that this space, once mine, now belonged to her, I found something that confirmed my suspicions. A folder containing falsified copies of property transfer documents with my forged signature. With trembling hands, I photographed everything with my cell phone and immediately sent the images to George. His response was quick. "This is evidence of a crime. We can act now." "Not yet," I replied. "I want to see how far they'll go." The opportunity to discover more came in the form of a dinner party Jessica organized at the house. Among the guests were Richard and his wife, as well as a man who was introduced as Charles Vance, a potential buyer of a family investment. During dinner, I served the dishes and discreetly observed the interactions. Charles seemed like a successful businessman, the kind who doesn't ask many questions when a deal looks too good. "So, Michael, when can we finalize the transaction for the Miami land?" he asked as I was pouring the wine. "My investors are anxious." Jessica intervened with her most charming smile. "We're just waiting for some final signatures. You know how bureaucracy is." When I returned to the kitchen to get dessert, I heard Jessica whisper to Michael, "He's offering $500,000. We need to close this before the old woman realizes anything." That night, I couldn't sleep. The confirmation of their criminal intentions was there recorded on audio and witnessed by me. But one piece of the puzzle was still missing. How involved was Michael? Was he an active perpetrator or just manipulated by Jessica? The next morning, I decided to take a risk. While Jessica was in the shower, I knocked gently on the office door where Michael was working on his laptop. "Son, can I talk to you for a minute?" I asked, keeping my voice low. Michael seemed surprised and a bit uncomfortable. "Now is not a good time, Mom. I'm busy." "It's about the land in Miami," I said directly, watching his reaction. His face turned pale instantly. What land?" "The land that you and Jessica are planning to sell to Charles Vance." Michael stood up abruptly, looking towards the door to make sure no one was listening. "How do you know that? You shouldn't know about that." "I know a lot more than you imagine, son," I replied calmly. "I know about the forged documents about the plans to sell properties that don't belong to you." He ran a hand over his face, suddenly looking aged and defeated. "Mom, you don't understand. We have serious financial problems. Jessica, she has debts you can't imagine. And the solution is to commit crimes, to forge my signature, to treat me like a burden to be discarded in a nursing home." He didn't answer. He just sank into the chair, avoiding my gaze. "Michael, look at me," I asked, feeling a mix of sadness and disappointment. "Your father raised you better than that. He always made everything easy for you." Michael muttered, a trace of resentment in his voice. "He left everything to you without thinking about me, about my children." "Is that what Jessica told you?" I asked, surprised by his distorted perception. "Michael, your father secured your future in other ways. The Children's Education Fund, the seed money for your company. He just wanted to protect me, knowing I'd be alone. Jessica says you're too old to manage so much money, that it will eventually end up in our hands anyway." The coldness of that statement hit me like a blade. So that was it. Were they just waiting for me to die? Or perhaps speeding up the process by forcing me to live in deplorable conditions? Before I could respond, we heard Jessica's footsteps approaching the office. Quickly, I changed my expression and my tone of voice. "So, son, think about what we discussed regarding that flan recipe. Your kids will love it," I said with a forced smile as Jessica entered. She looked at us suspiciously. "What are you two whispering about?" "My mother was just asking me to buy some ingredients for a dessert she wants to make for the kids," Michael replied quickly. Jessica smiled, but her eyes remained cold. How sweet of her. "But you don't have time for shopping now, Michael. We have that meeting with Richard in an hour." As I left the office, I felt Jessica's gaze piercing my back. She knew something was up, and that made her even more dangerous. That afternoon, while everyone was out, I made a call to George. I explained the conversation I had with Michael and the confirmations I got about their intentions. "Helen, we now have enough evidence to take legal action," the lawyer affirmed. "We can request a court order to prevent any transaction with your properties and initiate criminal proceedings against Jessica and anyone else involved in this scheme." "And what about Michael?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Your son is implicated, Helen. Even if he's just an accomplice by omission, he will have to answer for his actions." The thought of seeing my son face legal consequences for his mistakes broke my heart. Despite everything, he was still my son. The child I held in my arms, the one I taught to take his first steps. "I need more time, George. I want to give Michael a chance to do the right thing." "Time is running out, Helen. Based on what you told me, they are about to finalize the sale of the Miami land." "Just a few more days," I insisted. "I have a plan." After hanging up, I sat on the small bed in the shed contemplating my next move. I couldn't put it off any longer. It was time to confront not only Michael, but also Jessica with all the evidence I had collected. The next morning, I found an opportunity when Jessica left for the salon and the children were at school. Michael was alone in the office working on some documents that he quickly hid when I entered. "We need to talk, son. No interruptions, no excuses." He sighed, seeming resigned. "What do you want, Mom?" I placed an envelope on the table containing copies of all the legitimate property documents, along with photos of the forged documents I had found. "I want you to see what you are about to do," I said calmly. "And I want you to understand the consequences." Michael examined the papers, his face growing paler and paler. This is serious," he murmured, running his fingers over the documents. "How did you get all this?" "Your father taught me to always be prepared," I replied simply. "Michael, what you are doing is not just morally wrong. It's a crime. Forgery, attempted fraud, embezzlement." "It was Jessica's idea," he blurted out like a child trying to avoid blame. "She said it was just a matter of advancing the inheritance, that you didn't need all that money at your age. And you agreed to send me to a nursing home and treat me like an employee in my own house." He looked down, unable to meet my gaze. "The debts, Mom. Jessica has huge debts that she was hiding from me. When I found out, it was already too late. The bank is threatening to take our house, the car." "And the solution was to try to steal from your own mother?" I asked, feeling a deep pain in my chest. A heavy silence settled between us. Outside, the afternoon sun was beginning to set, casting a golden light through the office window. The same office where Arthur spent hours planning our future, ensuring our security. "What are you going to do now?" Michael finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Are you going to report us to the police?" "It all depends on you," I replied firmly. "I have 2 conditions. First, you immediately cancel any negotiation for the sale of the properties. Second, Jessica needs to know the game is over. She will never accept that. Then you will have to choose Michael, your wife, or your freedom." At that moment, we heard the sound of the front door opening. Jessica was back. Michael quickly gathered the documents and hid them in the drawer. "Think about it carefully, son," I said in a low voice before leaving the office. "Tomorrow, I want your answer." That night was the longest of the last few weeks. Lying on the hard bed in the shed, I heard the sounds from the main house. Raised voices coming from Michael and Jessica's room doors, slamming hurried footsteps in the hallway. The storm was just beginning. In the morning, Jessica came down to breakfast with red eyes and a tense face. She completely ignored my presence as she poured herself coffee. Michael appeared minutes later, equally downcast. The children, sensing the tension, ate in unusual silence. "Kids, finish up. I don't want you to be late for school." Jessica ordered, her voice harsher than usual. As soon as Jenna and Dylan left, Jessica turned to me, her eyes glittering with rage. "What are you plotting, you meddling old woman?" I remained calm, carefully placing my teacup on the table. "Just protecting what's mine, Jessica." "Michael told me about your conversation," she continued, approaching menacingly. "Do you think you can blackmail us, that you can destroy our family?" "The only person destroying this family is you, Jessica," I replied without raising my voice. "With your lies, your debts, your greed." She laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Look at you, an old woman who can barely climb a flight of stairs. What are you going to do with all that money, with properties you can't even manage?" "That's exactly the point, Jessica. It's my money. They are my properties. I decide what to do with them." She slammed her hand on the table, making the dishes rattle. "You're being selfish. You only think about yourself. We could use that money to give your grandchildren a better future." "Don't use the children as an excuse for your greed," I retorted, standing up to face her. "Arthur guaranteed their future with a generous education fund that you probably don't even know exists." This seemed to take her by surprise. Michael, who was witnessing the confrontation in silence, finally intervened. "Mom, we can't go on like this. We need to find a solution." "The solution is simple," I replied, looking directly at Jessica. "You cancel all the illegal negotiations, return all the forged documents, and we talk like adults about how to resolve the debt situation." Jessica let out a bitter laugh. "And why would I do that? Why would I give up millions just because an old woman decided she wants to keep everything? I took my cell phone out of my pocket and showed her the screen. Because I have recordings of all your conversations about forging documents, about plans to send me to a nursing home against my will, about defrauding buyers. I paused, watching her expression change from mockery to shock. And because I've already sent copies of everything to my lawyer with instructions to deliver them to the police in case anything happens to me. The color drained from Jessica's face. For a moment, I thought she was going to faint or attack me. Instead, she turned to Michael, her eyes full of fury. "Did you know about this? Did you know she was spying on us?" Michael seemed equally stunned. "No, I had no idea." Jessica turned back to me, her voice trembling with rage. "This isn't over. You won't get away with this." "It's already over, Jessica," I replied calmly. "The choice is yours now. We can resolve this in the family or through the justice system." She grabbed her purse and stormed out of the living room, slamming the door hard enough to make the windows shake. Michael remained motionless, as if trying to process everything that had just happened. "Do you really have all that evidence?" he finally asked. I nodded. "Every word, every plan, every document. Your father taught me to always be 2 steps ahead." Michael sank into the chair, covering his face with his hands. "My God, what have I done? How did I let things get to this point?" I approached him and, for the first time in weeks, placed my hand on his shoulder. "There's still time to fix things, son. But you have to make a decision." He looked at me, his eyes red. "What should I do?" "First, cancel the sale of the Miami land. Then we need to talk honestly about your financial situation." I paused. "And about the future of this family." Michael nodded slowly. "I'm going to call Richard right now and cancel everything." "Excellent. As for Jessica, she's not going to accept this easily," he interrupted, worried. "You don't know Jessica like I do. She might do something impulsive, dangerous." "That's why I have a plan B," I replied, "and it's time to put it into practice." The next morning brought a strange calm before the storm. Jessica had not returned home the night before. Michael said she was staying at a friend's house to cool off, but the tension in his voice revealed the situation was more complicated. The children, sensing the heavy atmosphere, asked questions that neither of us was prepared to answer. "Where's Mom?" Jenna asked during breakfast, her big eyes fixed on Michael. "She had to take care of some problems, honey," he replied, avoiding my gaze. "She'll be back soon." Dylan, always more perceptive than his sister, frowned. "Did you fight again?" Michael's silence was answer enough. After the children left for school, I sat with my son on the porch. The day was surprisingly beautiful, with a deep blue sky that contrasted with the darkness looming over our lives. "I called Richard and canceled everything," Michael reported nervously, turning the coffee cup in his hands. "He was not happy. He threatened legal action." "Let him threaten," I replied calmly. "He's just as implicated as you are. More, in fact, since he's the responsible agent." Michael sighed deeply. "What do we do now, Mom?" "Now we need to be honest with each other. I want to know the exact extent of your debts." He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that reminded me so much of Arthur that my heart ached. "It's worse than I imagined. Jessica has 3 maxed-out credit cards loans from loan sharks." As he detailed the situation, the picture that formed was alarming. Jessica had created a web of debt so extensive that not even the sale of the Miami land would be enough to cover it all. And worse, part of that money had gone to luxury purchases, secret trips, and even an extramarital affair with a tennis instructor. When Michael finished his story, he had tears in his eyes. "I was so stupid, Mom. So blind. How did I not realize what was happening right under my nose?" I touched his hand gently. "Sometimes we don't see what we don't want to see, son." At that moment, we heard the sound of a car parking abruptly. Jessica was back, and she didn't seem to be alone. Michael stood up quickly, his face revealing a mixture of apprehension and resignation. "Stay here," he said, before going into the house to meet her. From the porch, I heard raised voices coming from the living room. Jessica was yelling something about betrayal while a male voice I didn't recognize tried to calm her down. I decided it was time to make my presence known. When I entered the living room, I found Jessica accompanied by a tall, burly man, who, by the way he carried himself, was clearly not just a friend. "Ah, look who decided to show up," Jessica exclaimed when she saw me, her tone loaded with sarcasm. "The manipulative matriarch." The man beside her sized me up with a look that sent a shiver down my spine. There was something predatory in his eyes. "Who are you?" I asked directly. "This is Raymond," Jessica answered before he could speak. "My lawyer." Michael seemed as surprised as I was. "Lawyer? Since when do you have a lawyer?" "Since your dear mother decided to threaten us," Jessica retorted, throwing herself onto the sofa with studied drama. "Raymond is going to help us ensure we get what is rightfully ours." The man named Raymond stepped forward, showing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Helen, I believe there has been a misunderstanding here. You are of advanced age, possibly with compromised mental faculties." "My mental faculties are perfectly intact," I interrupted, keeping my voice firm. "As are my memory and my understanding of what is right and wrong, legal and illegal." He continued unperturbed. "As I was saying, considering your age and condition, it would be more prudent to allow your son and daughter-in-law to manage your estate. I can prepare a document of interdiction that—" "Interdiction!" Michael exclaimed, horrified. "Jessica, have you lost your mind? My mother doesn't need to be declared incompetent." Jessica stood up, facing him. "And what do you suggest, Michael? That we let her ruin our lives, that we lose everything because of her selfishness? The only selfishness here is yours. I refuted maintaining my calm. And as for you, Mr. Raymond, I suggest you research your clients better before proposing actions that could constitute crimes." Raymond narrowed his eyes. "Are you threatening me, madam?" "I'm just informing you," I replied, taking the cell phone out of my pocket. "Just as I informed my own lawyer, Mr. George Stevens, about everything that has been happening in this house, including the attempts at document forgery, the plans to send me to a nursing home against my will, and now this absurd proposal of interdiction." The name George Stevens caused a visible reaction in Raymond. Mr. Stevens was known for his unwavering integrity and his influence in legal circles. His confident smile wavered. "This is a bluff," Jessica intervened, but her voice betrayed uncertainty. "Do you want to take that risk?" I asked, looking directly at Raymond. "Mr. Stevens is just waiting for my signal to send all the documentation to the district attorney's office." A tense silence filled the room. Raymond seemed to be recalculating his strategy while Jessica alternated between expressions of fury and desperation. Michael stood by my side, his posture firm for the first time in weeks. "Perhaps it's better if we discuss this more calmly," Raymond said, finally adjusting his tie. "Jessica, can we speak privately?" They retreated to the kitchen, leaving me alone with Michael. He looked exhausted, as if he had aged years in just a few days. "Thank you," he murmured, "for not letting me sink completely." Before I could answer, Jessica returned alone, her face a rigid mask of control. "Raymond thinks it's better to reconsider our approach," she announced, each word pronounced with effort. "Apparently your contacts are more influential than we imagined." "It's not about influence, Jessica," I replied. "It's about legality." She nodded mechanically, avoiding looking directly at me or Michael. "Fine. So what do you propose?" "First, I would like you to leave this house," I declared firmly. "Michael and the children can stay, but you have to go." "What?" she exclaimed, incredulous. "You can't kick me out." "I can and I will. This house is in my name, Jessica. You treated me like an intruder. You relegated me to a servant's room. You humiliated me daily. Now it's your turn to feel what it's like to have nowhere to go." Michael intervened, visibly uncomfortable. "Mom, maybe this is too drastic." "It's non-negotiable, Michael," I affirmed, looking him in the eyes. "If you want to go with her, that's your choice. But I have conditions to help you with the debts, and the first one is that Jessica no longer lives under this roof." Jessica let out a bitter laugh. "So, this is it. Your revenge." "It's not revenge, Jessica. It's a consequence. You chose this path when you decided to treat me like trash in my own home, when you planned to steal what legally belongs to me, when you lied, manipulated, and betrayed. She looked at Michael, waiting for him to defend her to take her side. But he just lowered his head, defeated. The reality of Jessica's actions had finally hit him completely. "You have until the end of the day to pack your things," I concluded. "And tomorrow, we will discuss how we are going to resolve the issue of the debts. I am willing to help, but on my terms." Jessica grabbed her purse with sharp movements. "This isn't over," she hissed before storming out of the living room, heading up the stairs. When we were alone, Michael looked at me with an expression that mixed gratitude and shame. "Forgive me for everything, Mom, for letting things get to this point." "The important thing is that you finally opened your eyes," I replied, feeling a deep fatigue after the confrontation. "The rest we can fix with time." That night, while Jessica packed her things upstairs, I could hear her dragging suitcases and slamming doors. I returned to my small room in the shed. It was the last night I would spend there. Tomorrow, I would return to the master bedroom, the space I shared with Arthur for so many years. Sitting on the edge of the hard bed, I looked at the locket I still wore around my neck. I opened it and looked at the small photo of Arthur kept inside. His serene smile, his kind eyes. "You were right all along," I whispered to the image. "About Jessica, about protecting what we built together. Thank you for not leaving me helpless." A single tear rolled down my face. It wasn't a tear of sadness, but of relief. The worst was over. The storm was beginning to clear, and I was still standing. The dawn brought a strange stillness to the house. Jessica had left during the night, taking only 2 suitcases and leaving behind a letter for the children that Michael decided not to show them yet. "First, we need to know what to say, how to explain," he argued, his face marked by a sleepless night. As we prepared breakfast together, the first time in weeks I didn't feel like an employee. Michael seemed like a different man. Older, certainly, but also more centered, as if Jessica's removal had lifted an invisible weight from his shoulders. "How are we going to tell the children?" I asked, beating the eggs for an omelet. Michael sighed, running a hand over his tired face. "The truth, I think, or at least part of it, that their mom and I are separating, that she had to leave for a while." I nodded. Children sense more than we imagine. They probably already know something was very wrong. When Dylan and Jenna came down for breakfast, the impact of Jessica's absence was immediate. Jenna looked around confused. "Where's Mom?" Michael sat down, pulling his daughter onto his lap. "Your mom had to leave for a while, Princess. She and I decided we need some time apart." Jenna's eyes widened, and she began to cry silently. Dylan, on the other hand, remained impassive, almost as if he expected this moment. "Is she coming back?" Jenna asked between sobs. Michael hesitated, looking at me for support. "We don't know yet, honey, but what matters is that you and Dylan are safe here with Dad and Grandma, and we love you more than anything." Dylan finally spoke, his voice surprisingly mature for a 12-year-old. "She was yelling last night. She said she was going to take us from here." Michael turned pale. "You heard that?" Dylan nodded. "She came into our room late at night, woke Jenna up, and said she would come back for us, that she wouldn't let us stay with Grandma." A chill ran down my spine. Jessica was unpredictable, and that threat could not be ignored. Michael seemed to have reached the same conclusion. "I'm going to call the school and let them know that no one but me or Grandma is authorized to pick them up," he declared, hugging his children tightly. "And I'll talk to Mr. Stevens about a protection order." After the children were taken to school, Michael made sure to walk them to their classroom door. We met with George at his office. The lawyer listened attentively as we recounted the latest events, including Jessica's threat. "This is serious," he commented, adjusting his glasses. "Based on the evidence you collected, Helen and Michael's admission of the fraudulent activities, we have sufficient grounds to request not only a protection order for you, but also a restraining order, preventing Jessica from approaching the children without supervision." Michael looked devastated, but nodded in agreement. "I never thought it would come to this, but I need to protect my children." "And what about the debts?" I asked, returning to the practical aspect of the situation. Michael told me the situation is quite serious. George opened a folder on his desk. "We did a preliminary assessment. The total amount is approximately $60,000 distributed among credit cards, bank loans, and less conventional sources. Michael shrank in his chair. Loan sharks, he clarified in a low voice. Jessica resorted to loan sharks. That complicates things, George admitted. Those people don't usually follow legal channels for collection. I am willing to help pay off those debts, I declared, but with some conditions. Michael looked at me surprised. After everything we did, you still want to help. You are my son, Michael, and those children are my grandchildren. I am not going to abandon you. I turned to George. I want to establish a formal agreement. I will pay the legitimate debts, but Michael will need to undergo financial counseling, and I want legal guarantees that they will never again try to appropriate my properties. We can draft that, George agreed, taking notes. I also suggest formally transferring the house to your name in the property registry to avoid any future confusion. And the beach house? Michael asked, hesitant. Jessica mentioned something about it, but I never fully understood. Your father bought that property as our retirement refuge, I explained. It's a special place for me, Michael. One day maybe we can go there together. You, the kids, and me. But for now, I need it to be just my space. He nodded, understanding. I get it, Mom, and I respect that. We spent the next few hours outlining the agreement and initiating the legal processes for the protection order. When we returned home in the late afternoon, we sensed a strange presence as soon as we opened the door. The house had been tossed. Drawers opened, closets rummaged through objects scattered on the floor. The immediate panic was for Dylan and Jenna, but a quick call to the school confirmed they were still there participating in extracurricular activities. Jessica, Michael murmured, looking around in disbelief. She must have a spare key. I ran to the office, fearing the worst. The small safe behind the books was intact, but the desk drawer where Arthur kept less important documents had been forced open. Several folders were scattered on the floor. What could she have been looking for? I asked, more to myself than to Michael. Maybe something she could use against us. Some proof that you're not mentally fit, he suggested, helping me pick up the papers. Among the scattered documents, I noticed the absence of something important. The original purchase contract for the beach house in Naples. Although I had a copy in the safe, the original document contained details that Jessica could use in some way. We need to change the locks immediately, I declared, and install a security system. Michael was already on the phone hiring a locksmith and a security company. They'll be here in an hour, he reported after hanging up, and I'm going to pick up the kids from school right now. The sense of violation was deep. This house, which had always been my sanctuary, now seemed vulnerable, exposed. I sat in Arthur's chair, trying to control the trembling in my hands. Don't let it get to you, I whispered to myself. Not now. Not after everything you've faced. When Michael returned with the children, their faces reflected confusion at the state of the house and the technicians installing security cameras and changing locks. What happened here? Dylan asked, looking around with wide eyes. We had a small problem, Michael replied with studied calm. But we're taking care of everything. Jenna ran to me, hugging me tightly. It was Mom, wasn't it? She did something bad. The girl's perception surprised me. Why do you think that, honey? Because she was really angry last night. She said she was going to get back what was hers, that you had stolen something important. I exchanged a worried glance with Michael. Jessica was creating a dangerous narrative, perhaps even poisoning the children against me. Jenna, your grandmother didn't steal anything, Michael affirmed firmly. In fact, this house always belonged to her and Grandpa. We were the ones who were confused about that. The girl nodded, still clinging to me. I knew it. Mom was lying again. Again, I asked gently. She lies all the time, Jenna explained with the devastating simplicity of children. She says she's going to take us on an outing, but she never does. She promises gifts that never arrive. She says she loves us, but she yells a lot. My heart ached. The children had been silent witnesses to much more than we imagined. That night, after Dylan and Jenna went to bed, Michael and I sat on the porch. The new security lights illuminated the garden, creating dancing shadows on the plants that Arthur cultivated with such care. I never thought it would come to this. Michael confessed, his voice thick with emotion. A security system to protect us from my own wife. Sometimes people aren't who we think they are, I replied, watching the stars that were beginning to dot the night sky. Your father used to say that someone's true character is revealed in adversity. And my character? Michael asked, looking at me with eyes full of guilt. What did it reveal? That you still have a lot to learn, son, but also that you have the courage to recognize your mistakes and try to correct them. He smiled weakly. Thank you for not giving up on me, Mom. A mother never gives up, I replied, touching his hand gently, even when the path seems impossible. That night I slept in the master bedroom for the first time since Arthur's death. His scent still lingered subtly in the air on the pillows and the curtains. I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in weeks. The battle wasn't over yet, but I was back in the place that belonged to me. I woke with a start to the sound of the phone ringing. The digital clock on the nightstand read 3:17 a.m. Hello? I answered, my voice raspy with sleep. Mrs. Helen. The voice on the other end was deep professional. This is Captain Oliver from the Sheriff's Department. We have a situation that requires your presence immediately. My heart leaped. What happened? My son, my grandchildren. No, ma'am. It's about your daughter-in-law, Jessica. She was arrested trying to break into your property in Naples. The cold light of the police station contrasted with the still dark sky when I arrived, accompanied by Michael. We had left the children in the care of a trusted neighbor, promising to be back as quickly as possible. The drive to the station was silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts. Captain Oliver received us with a serious expression. He was a middle-aged man with tired eyes that revealed a career spent witnessing the worst of humanity. Mrs. Helen, Mr. Michael, thank you for coming so quickly, he said, leading us to his office. We have a delicate situation on our hands. How did Jessica get to Naples? I asked, still trying to process the information. Apparently she took a flight yesterday afternoon, the captain explained, consulting his notes. A neighbor of the property in the downtown area called the police around 1 a.m. when they noticed someone trying to force entry. When our officers arrived, they found Mrs. Jessica inside the house rummaging through closets and drawers. Michael covered his face with his hands. My God! Was she looking for something specific? I asked, although I already suspected the answer. According to her statement, she was looking for documents that would prove the property belongs to her husband and not to you, ma'am. The captain raised an eyebrow. Obviously, we checked the property registry and confirmed the house has been in your name for over 5 years. Is she being charged with breaking and entering? Michael asked, his voice trembling. Yes, and also damage to property. She broke a window to get in. I felt a chill. Was she armed? Was anyone else with her? No, ma'am. She was alone and unarmed, just carrying burglary tools. He paused. However, we found something concerning in the car she rented. The captain removed a set of forged documents from a folder. Deeds, powers of attorney contracts, all with signatures that were supposedly mine, but were obviously fake. She was planning to sell the property. I concluded, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. Even after everything that happened, she was still trying. She mentioned a buyer who was already interested, the captain confirmed. A foreign investor willing to pay in cash without many questions. Michael was pale, as if each new revelation was a physical blow. Can I see her? The captain hesitated. We don't normally allow it, but considering the circumstances. He sighed. 5 minutes, and an officer will be present the entire time. As Michael followed a uniformed officer toward the holding area, Captain Oliver turned his attention to me. Mrs. Helen, I must inform you that Mrs. Jessica made some serious allegations against you. She claims that you are mentally incompetent and that you manipulated your son against her. I smiled sadly. I imagined she would. We are not giving credit to those claims, he assured me, especially considering the evidence of forgery and breaking and entering. But I thought you should know. I nodded my thanks. What happens now? She will remain in custody until her arraignment, probably tomorrow. Then the judge will decide whether she will be released on bail or not. The thought of Jessica in a jail cell was disturbing despite everything. Not out of compassion for her, but for my grandchildren who would have to deal with that reality. If I didn't want to press charges, The captain looked at me seriously. It's your right, but considering the evidence of a larger scheme of fraud and forgery, the district attorney's office will likely proceed anyway. When Michael returned, his eyes were red. Without saying a word, we left the station into the fresh pre-dawn air. The sky was beginning to lighten on the horizon, announcing a new day. "How was she?" I asked as we walked to the car. "Unrecognizable," he replied in a low voice. "Not physically, but it was like looking at a stranger. She didn't even show remorse. She said I betrayed her, that I chose your money over our marriage. I'm sorry it came to this, son." He took a deep breath, running his hand through his disheveled hair. "You know what the worst part is? A part of me still worries about her. I still remember how she was at the beginning before all this." The drive home was in reflective silence. When we arrived, the sun had already fully risen, bathing our house in a golden light that seemed almost ironic given the circumstances. The children were still asleep when we entered. The neighbor, Mrs. Carter, was in the kitchen making coffee. "Is everything all right with you?" she asked, her concern evident on her kind face. "The children slept peacefully. They didn't even notice you left." We thanked her for her help, and Michael walked her to the door. I stayed in the kitchen, contemplating the cup of coffee Mrs. Carter had poured for me. The normality of the scene. The aroma of coffee, the morning light streaming through the window, the ticking of the clock on the wall, contrasted sharply with the chaos our family was facing. Michael returned and sat across from me, rubbing his tired eyes. "What are we going to tell the children?" he asked. It was the million-dollar question. How do you explain to children that their mother was arrested for trying to steal from their grandmother? How do you soften that truth without lying completely? "The truth, but in a way they can understand," I finally replied, "that their mom did something wrong and needs to face the consequences. That it doesn't mean she doesn't love them, but that sometimes adults make serious mistakes." Michael nodded slowly. "And what about us? Our future?" "One day at a time, son. First, we're going to make sure that you and the children are okay, emotionally and financially. Then we'll rebuild what we can." That morning when Jenna and Dylan came down for breakfast, their sleepy faces lit up when they saw us. It didn't matter what had happened. They were still children, resilient, hopeful, capable of finding joy, even in the most difficult circumstances. During breakfast, Michael found the courage to start the difficult conversation. "Kids, we need to talk about something important," he said, choosing his words carefully. "Mom, she did some wrong things and now she's with the police." Jenna's eyes went wide. "Is Mom a criminal?" "No, honey," Michael replied quickly. "She just made some very bad decisions that hurt other people." Dylan, always more perceptive, looked directly at me. "She tried to hurt Grandma, didn't she?" His intuition surprised me. "She tried to take things that didn't belong to her, Dylan. And that's wrong, no matter who does it." "When is she coming home?" Jenna asked, her little voice trembling. Michael hesitated. "We don't know yet, Princess. It might take some time, but what matters is that I'm here, Grandma is here, and we are going to take care of you with all our love." The following days were a mixture of legal procedures and emotional adjustments. Jessica was eventually released after the hearing, but with severe restrictive measures, prohibited from approaching me, the house, or the children without court supervision, in addition to having to wear an ankle monitor. Michael began the divorce proceedings, a decision that, although painful, brought a sense of finality that we all needed. With the help of Mr. Stevens, we began to untangle the complex web of debts left by Jessica and create a plan to resolve them without compromising the children's future. A week after Jessica's arrest, I decided I needed some time for myself, to process everything that had happened and find my own inner peace. "I'm going to the beach house for a few weeks," I announced at dinner. "Are you sure you want to go alone, Mom?" Michael asked, worried. I smiled, touching his hand gently. "Yes. This is a special place for me, where your father and I planned to spend our retirement together. I need to reconnect with those memories, with that part of me that was forgotten in recent months." Jenna, who had become extremely protective of me, frowned. "But what if Mom tries to go there again?" "Don't worry, honey. The house has a security system now, and the neighbors are alerted. Besides," I added, winking at her, "your grandma is much craftier than she looks." The morning of my departure, the children gave me drawings to decorate the beach house. Dylan had drawn a boat sailing on a vibrant blue sea, while Jenna created a portrait of our family. Michael, Dylan, her and me, holding hands under a smiling sun. "So you don't feel lonely," she explained, hugging me tightly. Michael walked me to the car, helping with the suitcases. Before saying goodbye, I held his face between my hands, as I used to do when he was just a boy. "I'm proud of you, son, of the way you're handling all this, how you're taking care of the children." His eyes moistened. "I learned from the best mom, you and Dad." The drive to Naples was peaceful, a chance to reflect on everything that had happened and everything that was still to come. When I arrived at the beach house, I was greeted by the sound of the waves and the smell of salt air that I loved so much. The window broken by Jessica had already been repaired, and the security company had installed cameras and alarms as requested. Despite that, as I entered, I could still feel the vestiges of the invasion. Not in the walls or furniture, but in the energy of the place, in the subtle sense of violation. I spent the rest of the day cleaning, organizing, reclaiming that space as my own. I put the children's drawings on the refrigerator, opened all the windows to let the sea air circulate, changed the sheets, and arranged my clothes in the closet Arthur and I used to share. At night, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine, watching the stars reflected in the ocean. The locket with Arthur's photo rested against my chest, a constant reminder of his love and foresight. "You were right all along, my love," I whispered to the starry sky. "About Jessica, about protecting what we built, about giving me the means to defend myself." A gentle breeze caressed my face as if Arthur were answering from beyond. I closed my eyes and allowed for the first time in a long time the tears to flow freely. Not just tears of sadness for the loss or for the recent trauma, but also tears of relief, of release. Here in this seaside refuge, far from the chaos and painful memories, I could finally begin to heal. I could reconnect with the woman I was before this whole ordeal, the woman Arthur loved for nearly 4 decades, the woman who had found the strength to face one of the greatest betrayals imaginable. And as the waves broke rhythmically on the beach, carrying away fragments of pain with each ebb, I began to glimpse a future different from the one I had imagined, but still full of possibilities. A future where I wouldn't just be Arthur's widow or the grandmother relegated to a back room, but Helen, complete, resilient, the author of her own story. 3 months passed since my arrival at the beach house. Fall was beginning to give way to winter, bringing with it stronger winds and colder nights. But I had found a new rhythm, a new normal in this place that was now truly my home. Every morning I walked barefoot on the beach, feeling the cold sand between my toes and letting the waves occasionally touch my feet. I had made friends with other residents in the area, mostly retirees like me, people who understood the value of shared silence while watching the sunrise. Michael and the children visited me every 2 weeks, bringing with them stories of a life that was slowly being rebuilt. Dylan was excelling in school, especially in math, while Jenna had discovered a passion for drawing that went far beyond childish scribbles. Michael, for his part, seemed more centered, more present as a father and as a son. "How are things going with the therapist?" I asked during one of those weekends as we prepared lunch together. "Surprisingly well," he replied, chopping vegetables with newly acquired precision. "Dr. Evans says I'm making significant progress in recognizing patterns of codependency." I smiled, proud of his openness to seeking help. "And the children? Dylan is handling it well. You know how resilient he is. Jenna still has occasional nightmares, but the art therapy is helping a lot." He paused, hesitant. Jessica requested supervised visits. My heart tightened. Despite everything, she was still those children's mother. "And how do you feel about that?" "Conflicted," he admitted. "Part of me wants to protect them completely, but I know they need their mother, even with all her problems." He looked at me with inquisitive eyes. "What do you think?" "I think the children deserve the chance to maintain a relationship with their mother as long as it's safe and healthy. I replied honestly. Supervised visits seem like a good start. He nodded, relieved by my understanding. The criminal case is still ongoing, but her lawyer managed a deal for her to receive psychiatric treatment instead of serving prison time. It's the best for everyone, especially for Dylan and Jenna. That afternoon, while the children played on the beach under our watchful gaze, Michael handed me an envelope. "The divorce papers were finalized yesterday," he explained. "And we also managed to resolve most of the debts. Your loan. I don't know how to thank you, Mom." "It's not a loan, Michael. It's an investment in the children's future. In your future." I squeezed his hand. "Your father would have done the same." At night, after everyone had gone to sleep, I sat on the porch, as had become my ritual. The ocean was rough, reflecting my own thoughts. The journey of the last few months seemed almost surreal, from the humiliation of being relegated to a utility room to the empowerment of taking back control of my life. I remembered the day after Arthur's funeral when Jessica threw my suitcases into the garage and declared the house now belonged to her. In that moment, I felt so small, so defeated. Who could have imagined that humiliation would be the catalyst for such a profound transformation? The next morning, I woke to the sound of children's laughter. Dylan and Jenna were on the beach with Michael, building an elaborate sandcastle. I watched them from the porch, my heart overflowing with a love that seemed almost painful in its intensity. "Grandma, come see our castle," Jenna shouted when she saw me waving enthusiastically. I went down to the beach, feeling the sand gradually warm under my feet as the sun rose on the horizon. The castle was impressive. Towers, moats, even a makeshift drawbridge made of sticks. "It's Grandma's house," Dylan explained seriously, "but better because it has a protector dragon." He pointed to a sand formation that, with some imagination, could be interpreted as a dragon. "And who lives in this castle?" I asked, playing along. "All of us," Jenna declared with conviction. "You, Dad, me, Dylan, and Grandpa Arthur, too, like a good ghost who protects us." Michael met my gaze over the children's heads, his eyes moist. "It's a beautiful idea, isn't it, Mom? All of us together protected." I nodded, unable to trust my voice at that moment. The simplicity of Jenna's vision, our family united even with its imperfections and absences, touched something deep in me. After lunch, while the children were resting, Michael and I walked along the beach. The afternoon sun created golden reflections on the water, and seagulls hovered lazily above our heads. "I've been thinking," he said, after a long, comfortable silence. "Maybe we should sell the house in Chicago." I looked at him surprised. "Are you sure you grew up in that house?" "Yes, but there are too many difficult memories there now. For me, for the children." He gently kicked a pebble in the sand. "I was thinking of buying something smaller, maybe closer to here. The kids love the sea, and being close to you. I would love that," I replied sincerely. "But I don't want you to make that decision for me. It's not just for you, Mom. It's for all of us." He smiled a smile that so strongly resembled Arthur's that my heart ached. "I think we need a fresh start." That night, after Michael and the children left for the last flight back to Chicago, the house felt strangely silent. I had already gotten used to the tranquility of my solitary routine, but after a weekend of laughter and conversations, their absence was almost physical. I sat on the sofa with a cup of tea, flipping through a photo album that Arthur had meticulously organized over the years. Our wedding, Michael's birth family vacations, birthdays, graduations. A whole life captured in images. When I got to the last pages, I found something I hadn't noticed before. A small envelope taped to the back cover. Carefully, I left it.